Hi, I'm Saroja Coelho, host of the Saturday afternoon call-in show, Just Asking.
Manitobans, host of the Sunday afternoon call-in show, Cross Country Checkup.
Whether it's
Happening in your backyard.
every weekend, we connect Canada live.
That's Just Asking with Saroja Coelho, Saturday afternoons at 4 Eastern.
And Cross Country Checkup with Ian Henemansing, Sunday afternoons at 4 Eastern on CBC Radio 1.
You know the feeling of finding a really good podcast? Or the feeling of someone always being there, like your favorite radio show? Stream CBC Podcasts, CBC Music, and CBC Radio anytime, anywhere. Download the CBC Listen app for free.
This is CBC News. At 12 o'clock, we're at minus 19 degrees with mainly sunny skies over downtown Winnipeg. Good afternoon. I'm Matt Humphrey. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is stepping down. He announced his decision outside his official residence in Ottawa. He will remain as Liberal leader and Prime Minister until the party chooses his successor. David Thurton has your details.
Last night over dinner, I told my kids about the decision that I'm sharing with you today. I intend to resign as party leader, as Prime Minister.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says his resignation will take effect after his party chooses a new leader. Last night, Trudeau says he informed the president of the Liberal Party. Today, Trudeau also spoke with the Governor-General asking her to prorogue Parliament until March 24th, a move that ends parliamentary committees and kills all legislation making its way through the chambers. Trudeau telling reporters the House of Commons has become paralyzed.
But I truly feel that removing the contention around my own continued leadership is an opportunity to bring the temperature down.
The move also prevents opposition parties bent on toppling the government from doing so, at least until Parliament resumes in March. David Thurton, CBC News, Ottawa.
Reaction has come swiftly. Opposition leader Pierre Poilievre released a video to social media. He says every potential Liberal leadership contender supported Trudeau over the past 9 years.
They want to protect their pensions and paycheck by sweeping their hated leader under the rug months before an election to trick you and then do it all over again.
In Ottawa, Bloc Québécois leader Yves-François Blanchet says Trudeau made the right decision and he hopes Trudeau's eventual successor will call an election as soon as possible. In a statement, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh says the problem is not just Justin Trudeau. He says it's every Liberal MP who looked down their noses at Canadians. One of Manitoba's most senior Liberal MPs, meanwhile, has commented on Trudeau's resignation. St. Boniface MP Dan Vandel says he respects the Prime Minister's decision to step down as leader and he thanks him for his leadership. Vandel then goes on to list accomplishments of the government, including supporting Canadians through the pandemic, the Child Canada benefit, the Canada Dental Care Program, the carbon rebate, and reconciliation work with Indigenous peoples. Vandel has said he is not running in the next election. And Christopher Adams is the adjunct professor of political studies at the U of M. He says the pressure had been on for some time for members of his own caucus to step down.
I think it was long overdue. There were people, like months ago were hoping that he would make a decision and make it known. We know that 25 members of parliament in the fall had sent a letter asking for him to step down.
Adams says former finance minister Chrystia Freeland stepping down in December meant Trudeau had little choice but to step down now. We'll hear more from Adams coming up on Radio Noon right after this newscast. In other news, 2 people are under arrest after separate stabbings in Winnipeg. The first happened on Saturday afternoon along McPhillips. A woman in her 40s was taken to hospital in unstable condition, and a 29-year-old woman was arrested. And then last night, a man in the Westdale neighborhood had to be taken to hospital in unstable condition. He was in his 20s, and the suspect was a 17-year-old. In both stabbings, the people were related. Court documents obtained by CBC News show an unlikely story about one man's attempt to sneak into Canada. Border officials say a Turkish man attempted to sail to Newfoundland from the French islands not far away. Patrick Butler explains.
The Turkish national flew from Paris to St. Pierre in early September. He hoped to continue on to Canada, where he had previously been denied a visa, but he wasn't sure how he'd make it across the final stretch of ocean separating him from Newfoundland. He ended up in a bar where a local recommended he chat with another patron, an Ontario man who owned a sailboat. Over drinks, the two hatched a plan, according to the affidavit, and agreed to sail to Grand Bank, where the Turkish man stayed for a time in an abandoned house. The two men taxied to Argentia, where the Turkish man hoped to take the ferry to Nova Scotia, but the ferry wasn't running, so they continued on to St. John's, where the Turkish man eventually asked for asylum. Police alerted the Canada Border Services Agency, and the Turkish man was arrested about a day later. He has since returned to Paris. The Canadian managed to weigh anchor and leave Grand Bank before the authorities caught up to him. He did, however, make a mayday call 2 days later. The Coast Guard ended up towing his ship to Burgeo. The boat owner is under investigation for violating the Immigration Act. No charges have been filed. Patrick Butler, CBC News, St. John's.
And finally, a huge swath of the United States is being blasted by ice and snow and wind, affecting around 60 million people. This weather is expected to bring heavy snow, blizzard conditions, and dangerously cold temperatures from the Midwest to the East Coast. Governors in several states, including Kansas, Kentucky, Arkansas, West Virginia, Maryland, have all declared states of emergency. And that is your CBC News from Winnipeg. For news anytime, you can head to our website, cbc.ca/Manitoba, or you can use the CBC News app looking at the forecast for the afternoon ahead. A high of minus 17 this afternoon, around 17, with periods of light snow perhaps. Brandon, light snow at times, a high of minus 16. Dauphin, periods of light snow, a high around minus 16 as well. Flin Flon, sunny, a high around minus 23 degrees. Thompson, mainly sunny, a high of minus 21. And in Churchill, you're seeing sunshine, a high around minus 32. You're listening to CBC.
Good afternoon. You're listening to Radio Noon. I'm Laurie Hoogstraten. On this chilly day in Manitoba and this rather momentous day in Canada, coming up on the program, based on the fact that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has just resigned as party leader, we want to hear what is your reaction. What do you think of the timing of this move? What do you think should happen now? And who do you suspect will throw their hat into the ring as the next Liberal leader? Give us a call at 204-780-0893. And we'll have a little refresher on block heaters, when they're good and when they're bad. But first up, as Matt mentioned, this morning, Prime Minister Trudeau resigned as party leader, and Christopher Adams will give us a Manitoba perspective on what that means for Canada. Earlier today, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced that he is resigning as Liberal Party leader. From the front steps of Rideau Cottage, he told Canadians that he was stepping down in the best interest of Canada and the Liberal Party. Trudeau said he will remain as Prime Minister until a new leader is chosen at a leadership convention to be held soon. He also said that he asked Governor-General Mary Simon to prorogue Parliament, and she granted that request. Christopher Adams, adjunct professor of political studies at the University of Manitoba, has been following today's events closely. Good afternoon.
Hi, Larry. Nice to be with you again.
Nice to have you here. So what's your reaction to Trudeau stepping down?
Well, you know, we're all waiting for some sort of announcement. I think pretty well all Canadians as well as Liberals were waiting to hear about what his decision it was to be. I think it was long overdue. There were people, you know, like months ago were hoping that he would make a decision and make it known. We know that 25 members of Parliament in the fall had sent a letter asking for him to step down. And now, so much later, after the debacle with Chrystia Freeland stepping down as finance minister back in December, it's long overdue. But I think it was the only thing that he could do was to say that he's not going to be staying on as Liberal leader. So
why, though, did he acquiesce finally instead of hanging on?
Well, you know, we do know that over the past few weeks that the regional caucuses, not just the full national caucus, but within the caucus of the elected members of Parliament who are Liberal, that the different regions were coming forward saying that most of their members were saying that he should step down. And that included Atlantic Canada, included Quebec, and included the Ontario caucus. And we knew in the West he wasn't very popular. So where does that leave him? It leaves him with a caucus that isn't backing him up. And you can't be the leader of a party when your members of your caucus aren't in support of you. So it was really an intolerable position for him to stay in if he continued to be walking in the snow, to use that metaphor.
Mm-hmm. So Trudeau said his resignation will reduce the level of polarization in the House and bring the temperature down. Is that likely?
Well, it might. When you put forward an interim leader in Parliament or in the legislature here in Manitoba, that person's sort of like a caretaker person who's not really coming forward with new directions and things like that, more of a caretaker of the business of the day. So I would say that over the past couple of years, Justin Trudeau has been a polarizing figure for many people who feel that the Liberal Party has moved away from some of its more financial responsible positions, and he himself has been a lightning rod for complaints both within the Liberal caucus, within the Liberal Party, and elsewhere. So I'm not just preaching the Poilievre line. I'm saying that he's been leader for a long time. Since 2015, he's been prime minister. Since 2013, so over 10 years, he's been the leader of the party. So there is a sense that it is time for the party to move on. Like, you might remember that when Jean Chrétien had his difficulties with Paul Martin, and when he stepped down, there was a sense that he had really gone too long as the leader of the Liberal Party. And there is that sense with Justin Trudeau.
So Parliament is prorogued, which will delay the start of the new session of Parliament. What will that do?
Well, all legislation that was in action, with things being voted on, bills, things like that, will be suspended. Everything drops. And so we were expecting for those who didn't expect a proroguing of the House, there was the expectation that the House of Commons would resume its business of the current session come late January, but that now will not happen. So all those bills that were being worked on and that were supposed to be going through second and third reading, all those bills get dropped. So right now it's a new session that will be happening when Parliament comes back together, and there'll be a speech from the throne. And likely at that point, there'll be a non-confidence vote.
And if the Liberals are focused on a leadership convention, how will that affect dealing with a Trump presidency in terms of their...
I guess it's one or the other thing. If Justin Trudeau hadn't decided to do what he did today, there would be the federal government would be in disarray with a prime minister who's not having the support of his caucus and others. But there's the other problem right now is there's no real effective leader dealing with the problems resulting from American politics. So the premiers will continue to operate in Canada in dealing with U.S. issues in their own way. Alberta will see Doug Ford continue in his own way defending Ontario's interests. And here in Manitoba, Wab Kinew is setting up a permanent office in Washington, D.C. to deal with U.S. matters. So there has been a vacuum for a while of a single voice from the federal government, and that will continue for the next while until likely the next election and a prime minister is duly elected.
And who do you think is most likely to throw their hats into the leadership ring?
Well, there are a number of names, such as Melanie Joly, who's head of who's foreign affairs. But I think most people are looking at Chrystia Freeland. It's an open story. People know that she's got an organization that's pulling itself together and going for the leadership. Many people expect Mark Carney, the past leader of the Bank of Canada, as well as the Bank of England afterwards. And he's been putting out a lot of feelers about this, and he's got a new book coming out this year about his position on world politics. And another name, which is an interesting person, is Christy Clark, who's more of the conservative side of the Liberal Party, past Premier of British Columbia. So those are three, and there are other members of the Liberal caucus right now, federal caucus, who we'll probably see. So I would expect we'll see 5 or 6 names coming forward of fairly prominent names.
Well, and just as a final question, Christopher, from a political study scholar's point of view, is this a pretty exciting and unusual state of affairs for you?
Well, it's the Chinese curse. May you live in interesting times. So it is an interesting time. But every year there is something interesting, whether it's a Winnipeg election or provincial or things like that. So I would say there's always something interesting happening in politics at different levels. But right now is a super heated day for politics and news interviews.
Well, thank you very much for making some time for us.
Thanks, Laurie. Always nice to talk to you.
Nice to talk to you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Christopher Adams is Adjunct Professor of Political Studies at the University of Manitoba.
Breaking news happens anywhere, anytime.
Police have warned the protesters repeatedly, get back.
CBC News brings the story to you as it happens.
Hundreds of wildfires are burning.
Be the first to know what's going on and what that means for you and for Canadians.
This situation has changed very quickly.
Helping make sense of the world when it matters most. Stay in the know. CBC News.
You're listening to Radio Noon. I'm Laurie Hoog-Stratton. And as Christopher Adams just said, it's a pretty momentous day. Lots going on in terms of the reaction and so on to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau resigning as party leader. And that's what we want to talk about with you after the 12:30 news. What do you think should happen next now that Justin Trudeau has resigned as party leader? Give us a call at 204-780-0893. What do you think of the timing? What do you think the opposition is going to do in reaction? And who do you think should be the next Liberal leader and why? 204-780-0893. And in just a minute, block heaters can be bad news if they aren't used properly. They can cause fires. We'll hear how you can safely keep your car plugged in during these frigid temperatures. And these temperatures, they're pretty frigid, although normals are minus 13, and we're heading for maybe minus 18 today. Roddy says the next chance for snow comes overnight Wednesday into Thursday. Periods of light snow across the south lingering into Friday. And in the Winnipeg region today, as I say, minus 18 is what we're shooting for. Tomorrow, minus 17, starts to warm up. And they're saying minus 3 on Thursday. We'll see about that. Brandon, minus 22. Churchill, minus 32. In Dauphin, it's minus 18. Gimli, minus 21. The Paw, minus 20. Thompson, minus 22. Winnipeg at this hour is pretty breezy at minus 19 with south-south winds at 21. You are listening to Radio Noon, 89.3 FM, 990 AM. I'm Laurie Hoog-Stratton. Block heaters are being blamed for 3 fires that happened over the weekend in Winnipeg. Fire crews battled the 3 separate blazes in residential homes. We rely on block heaters when the temperatures dip as low as they've been lately, and it's important to know what's safe and what isn't when it comes to plugging our cars in when it's very cold. Scott Wilkinson is the Deputy Chief of Winnipeg's Fire Paramedic Service. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Laurie.
So what is it about block heaters that sometimes makes them a fire hazard?
Well, block heaters in themselves aren't really the issue. It's the service and maintenance of them that's the concern. So in many cases, they're exposed to the elements. People have frayed or damaged cords. The cords get pulled out or left hanging on the side of the vehicle. These kinds of things put together with unapproved or inappropriate extension cords can lead to electrical issues and, unfortunately, vehicle fires.
And so how should they be used safely? As you just pointed out, maintenance, but is where they are used or how they're plugged in an issue as well?
Well, as anything, we don't recommend plugging in vehicles inside in a detached garage or any kind of structure because of these risks, and then it could cause spread to the structure and, of course, risk people's lives. But in the usage of block heaters the rest of the time can be considered relatively safe if people's block heaters are inspected. They inspect their cords to make sure they're not frayed or damaged, and they're tested. And they're using extension cords that are CSA approved and not damaged as well. If those are all done in their proper circuit and plugged in appropriately, they should be safe.
And it seems, though, even though they're safe in themselves, that people don't seem to treat them with the respect they deserve. Is there kind of an education campaign or something that people need to know?
Well, that's one of the reasons we're, pleased to be speaking with yourself and others in the media regarding these recent fires, is to just bring that awareness about. There is, it is a fairly simple matter of making sure cords aren't banging up and down the sides of cars. You're not often, and many people have done this where they're plugged in, they forget about the cord, they drive away and it pulls out or drags down the street. you should not be using that cord again, because often you don't see it, but the interior electrical elements have been damaged, and that can cause short circuits and fires. So the key is really just making sure they maintain good condition of the cords, the block heater itself, and any of the extension cords, and to plug them in outside.
Well, you said, just to emphasize that, you said don't use them in an attached garage or any enclosed space. So block heaters should not be used in the garage at all. It should only be outside?
Yeah, for the most part, vehicles do not require a block heater if they're in a garage to start. Block heater is not intended to keep your car warm. They're there to help the car start. So at these extreme temperatures, if parked outside, it is appropriate. But again, we do caution against plugging in block heaters when it's not really required on an interior or an attached garage, because we've seen these fires can be starting if people aren't careful. And in many cases, without the right smoke alarms or other options, these fires can go undetected and become quite extensive before people are aware of them and put people at risk.
Mm-hmm. And just before I let you go, what about in-car heaters? Are they risky?
Similar concept, really. The interior car warmers that some people use, again, it's all about, is it installed professionally? Is it inspected? Is it tested? Is it maintained properly? But any kind of mechanical heater or electrical device, if not managed appropriately, can pose a risk. And it's the same kinds of things we're cautioning people about in the cold weather today, about plugging in extra heaters in homes and things like that. Again, inspection, maintenance, proper cords, because they can pose a hazard as well as anything that can be creating carbon monoxide. These are the tightest times of year, and we see these issues rising as well.
Well, thank you very much for the refresh, and thanks for being with us.
Not a problem. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye. That's Scott Wilkinson. He is the Deputy Chief of Winnipeg's Fire Paramedic Service.
Manitoba's the kind of place that draws you in. Every day it's growing, it's changing. Just when you think you've got it figured out, though, there's something new to understand. I'm Marcy Marcusa, host of the CBC Daily Podcast. This is Manitoba. I've covered the news from the rail line in Churchill to the border in Emerson, and it's talking about the local stories that help us understand this place. That's what This is Manitoba is all about. Find it on CBC Listen or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.
You're listening to Radio Noon. It is 21 minutes after 12 o'clock. Well, it's a special day in Nunatsiavut. That's today, Monday, is Old Christmas Day, called Nalyuk. That's when mysterious figures called Nalyut come from faraway lands to visit the communities. If children are good and sing in Inuktitut, they may get a treat. If they're bad, they'll get chased and whacked with a stick. Joan Dicker is one of the organizers of the activities in Nunatsiavut, and she began with describing how the Nalyut look.
They are usually dressed in sealskin clothing or like old atigit and skin boots and furry masks or sealskin masks, and sometimes they have chains around them and caribou antlers and harpoons and whatever they can find, I guess. Nalyut Day is the most exciting day of the Christmas season for a lot of the children. So for sure, the excitement is in the air for them. In the past, like when we were growing up, the Nalyut, we were always told that the Nalyut traveled by the sea ice. And, we would be watching out, towards the ice to see. And we would actually, see Kamutik dog teams coming in. And it would be, it was a scary feeling back then because they were so real and they were so scary, but we don't have dog teams anymore. So the last few years, the skidoos brought them in. And then we were walking out on the sea ice, and the skidoos would pick them up and bring them into town. So I think it's still scary for some of the children. Sometimes the Nalyut go into people's homes, but it also happens outside where when the Nalyut are chasing the children or chasing the people, and they come into your homes, and in order not to get hit with their stick or whatever they got, there's a couple of songs that's usually sung, and it's Through Tit Sit and Napatuli. So Through Tit Sit is Oh Come Little Children, and Napatuli is Oh Christmas Tree. So those are usually the two Christmas songs that are sung. Okay, the first one is Surut Sit Sit. Surut Sit Sit Nutarat Sumut Atatapani tupkhailau tanganut takuyatulavut piu litlitik inni angutain natupislini. And the other one, Oh Christmas Tree, goes something like this. Na patuli, nitu na mari putit, tunguyu putit tukiyuk, auyamitu inaungituk, akun napat pit silipat, ilanitu na putit. So usually when they sing those songs, they're given a treat from the Nulliuit, if they got any. That's how it used to be when we were growing up, you know. Like sometimes they didn't have any, sometimes they had some, and they'd throw the candies at us or whatever. And if we have our name care event, we when the brass band plays, and after they play, the children, we get everyone to sing Surut, it Kaitit, and then we hand out treats for the Nulliuit. Like later on in the night, probably like around 9, 10 o'clock, that's when the more Nulliuit come out, and they're like usually the fast runners, and they're chasing people, chasing children, and you know, it's like sometimes you have to run for your life, and they do when they catch people, they hit them, you know, and some. You know, so it's like being excited, being scared at the same time, and just having fun. And you hear all about it the next day, you know, like I guess when they go back to school the next day, they share their stories of their experiences with Nulliuit night.
Sounds wild. Joan Dicker is one of the organizers of Nulliuit Night in Nain Nunusavut. You're listening to Radio Noon. It's just about 26 minutes after 12 o'clock. Got time for a tune here. Reasons is a new EP from singer-songwriter Brett Schultz, and it's a very good reason to check out the work of this Winnipeg-based musician. The EP is just the first part of a series of new music coming in 2025. From Brett Schultz, this is Reasons.
Saturday was pretty dull, I know. Not much to say about it, and I don't need a reason anyway. I don't need to say anything at all. Sometimes I think you're in my life, and other times I cannot tell the difference. You would not give a signal anyway. I gave you no reason to say. Sometimes I can't even reason with myself. I stand and stutter, wondering what will come of it. Maybe someday I will try again to listen to reason again. Yesterday was a sunny afternoon. Birds are gone as summer's blown away. I do not even care that it's gone. I've always preferred it this way. Always. Sometimes I can't even reason with myself. I stand and stutter, wondering what will come of it. Maybe someday I will try again to listen to reason reasons are the devil anyway. Careful what you say, it'll never leave you. To think I've never looked at it this way. I guess sometimes there's reasons to say.
Out of Winnipeg, that was Brett Schultz with Reasons. And coming up after the 12:30 news, we want to hear from you. What do you think should happen next now that Justin Trudeau has resigned? Give us a call, 204-780-0893, and let us know what you think about Justin Trudeau's resignation as party leader. What do you think of the timing? Who do you think will throw their hats into the ring? Let us know what you think. 204-780-0893. You're listening to CBC Radio Noon. The news is next.
This is CBC News. At 12:30, we're at minus 18 degrees with mainly sunny skies over downtown Winnipeg. Good afternoon. I'm Matt Humphrey. As you've been hearing, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has announced his resignation.
I have always been driven by my love for Canada, by my desire to serve Canadians, and by what is in the best interest of Canadians. And Canadians deserve a real choice in the next election. And it has become obvious to me with the internal battles that I cannot be the one to carry the Liberal standard into the next election.
Trudeau says Governor General Mary Simon has agreed to suspend Parliament until March 24th to allow the Liberal Party time to select a new leader. And Trudeau says he will stay in office until that new leader is voted in. Trudeau has led the party for 12 years and has served as Prime Minister since 2015. And he says he's eager for the Liberals to recharge as a party and take on the Conservatives in the next election.
We need an ambitious, optimistic view of the future. And Pierre Poilievre is not offering that. And I look forward to the fight as progressives across this country stand up for the kind of vision for a better country that Canadians have always carried.
Trudeau's announcement today comes less than a month after Chrystia Freeland resigned as finance minister, leading to calls from within the party for Trudeau to step down. The outgoing U.S. ambassador to Canada, meanwhile, says he's confident in the future of trade relations with Canada. David L. Cohen is in Winnipeg today on his final tour of Canada before he leaves the position. He says so far the threats by President-elect Donald Trump to impose a 25% tariff on Canadian goods are rhetoric. Cohen looks to what happened during the first Trump presidency, for example.
There was rhetoric in that 4-year period, and there were excellent diplomatic initiatives, and I think the U.S.-Canada relationship survived and thrived in the last Trump presidency. And somewhere between my hope and my prediction is that the same thing will happen over the next 4 years.
Cohen believes the ongoing negotiations involving the provincial premiers will be helpful in keeping trade open between our two countries. And finally, Winnipeg police have arrested a woman in connection to the murder of a 50-year-old man in Windsor Park. Early in the morning of December 27th, Winnipeg police found Byron Frederick Moose of OP Pond, Nepewan Cree Nation badly hurt. He later died in hospital. On January 2nd, police arrested 33-year-old Anissa Christie Pompana along Arlington Street and charged her with second-degree murder. Investigators say the two were not previously known to each other, but met at a location, left together, and then Moose was seriously assaulted and died. And that is your CBC News from Winnipeg. For news anytime, you can head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thanks, Matt.
Back soon.
That's Matt Humphrey in the newsroom today. And now I'm joined in studio by Riley Lachek, who's looking warm and wonderful. You should be looking all chilly.
Yeah, hey, if you dress for the weather,
you have success with the weather.
You have success, exactly. Mix of sun and clouds here in Winnipeg, as expected today. Although I didn't put it into my forecast, a slight chance we could see maybe a couple of snowflakes later on this afternoon. And a little bit of instability tracking across parts of central and western Manitoba. Not much to write home about. Minus 19s right now in Winnipeg, Gimli, Victoria Beach, Steinbach. Brandon's at minus 21 right now. Thompson minus 22. We have an extreme cold warning still in place for Brochet and Tuduli Lake, far northern parts of the province. This is where we could see Wind chill values as cold as -40, -45 on exposed skin as we get through the overnight, into the overnight period again tonight, into tomorrow. This is frostbite on exposed skin in minutes, so still looking at some dangerously cold conditions in parts of the province. Not to say that we're not looking at another chilly night across parts of the province again tonight, but it meets that warning criteria in the far north. Sun and clouds across the province today. Really looking at a mix of sun and clouds through south and central parts of the province anyway. Again, a slight chance of maybe a couple of flurries, particularly through the Interlake, close to Lake Manitoba as we get through the afternoon hours. So be mindful. Maybe you'll run into a couple of flurries out there. But I think the chance, the further south you go, particularly here into the Red River Valley, I think is quite slim as we get through the afternoon. Otherwise, looking at a mix of sun and clouds for the rest of the day, partly cloudy overnight. Then we start with a mix of sun and clouds again tomorrow. Rinse and repeat as we get through Tuesday into Wednesday. We start to see a little bit more cloud building in. This ahead of our next weather maker, which will impact us later in the week, bringing some light snow as we get through Thursday into Friday. This afternoon, I've got Winnipeg at a high of -18 this afternoon. Maybe we get to -17 downtown, but really looking at temperatures staying around -18 or so through the afternoon hours today. Brandon, -17. Again, a chance we could see a couple of flurries to the west, Dauphin -16. Thompson -21 this afternoon. I've got us at -17 for Tuesday. Clouds build in -10 for Wednesday. And then we're looking at single digits on the minus side as we get through Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Periods of light snow, -3 for Thursday. Chance of flurries lingers into Friday morning, -9. And then a slight chance of flurries into Saturday with a high of -8.
Well, I think that sounds quite hopeful.
Yeah. So, I mean, a couple of cold nights yet to come.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, seasonal for this time of the year, but regardless, looking at some cooler nights ahead, but then we jump above seasonal by midweek.
Well, we just got a little pep talk about how to use your block heater properly.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
But I'm a little worried about your use of the phrase rinse and repeat in this weather. I don't know. It could be a little on the crispy side if you try that.
Yeah. I don't know. One of those two. One of those phrases.
Oh, thank you very much,
You're
Riley.
welcome.
That's weather specialist Riley Lechek, and you can hear him this afternoon on Up to Speed between 3 and 6, and of course see him on the CBC News at 6. You're listening to CBC Radio Noon. It is 23 minutes before 1 o'clock. I'm Laurie Hoogstraten, and we want you to give us a call about something you may have heard about today in the news. Justin Trudeau resigned this morning as Liberal Party leader. Trudeau says Parliament has been paralyzed for months and added that it's time for a fresh start in Parliament. He asked the Governor-General, Mary Simon, to prorogue Parliament, and she agreed, but says he will stay on as Prime Minister until the party chooses a new leader. So we want to know, what is your reaction to Trudeau's resignation? What do you hope happens next? What do you think is likely to happen next? And how is this going to affect everything from who throws their hat into the ring to having Trump sign up as the president on the 20th. Give us a call, 204-780-0893. And joining us by Zoom is Marco Vellotti, editor-in-chief of iPolitics. Hi, Marco.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Now, we're asking our listeners to call in with their reaction, and we have someone on the line already, 204-780-0893, but I'd like to hear yours. What's your reaction to Trudeau's resignation?
I mean, it's one of those interesting things in that it seemed inevitable, and it seemed inevitable for weeks after Chrystia Freeland resigned, of course, in mid-December, right, before she was supposed to deliver the fall economic statement. You really heard, the calls come from across caucus for Trudeau to step down. As, we got into that holiday break and the House rose, more and more regional caucuses came out against the Prime Minister, and it just seemed like it would be an impossible feat for him to run. I mean, I think going into this, we had the Atlantic, Quebec, and Ontario caucus all say, whether privately or publicly, that Trudeau needs to step down. So couldn't imagine an election campaign as leader when so many of your MPs or your own MPs are calling you to quit. So It was an inevitable moment. The timing, I mean, maybe we expected a bit of a wait, but at the same time, it all happened, I guess, as expected after Chrystia Freeland dropped that bombshell announcement.
Well, yeah, and interesting now that we've actually heard that he is going to resign, so people can carry the conversation forward. And do give us a call and join this conversation, 204-780-0893, and tell us your reaction. We have Jim on the line. Hi, Jim. What do you think?
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah. Well, I think in our current situation with our political parties the way they are, it's time for us to have an election immediately. If they put an interim leader in, that person hasn't been elected by the government, by the people. So the people need to decide who's going to govern our country.
All right. Well, I'll ask Marco to comment on that. Thank you very much for your call. So what do you think about what Jim said?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a terrific point. When you look at where things stood before the Prime Minister resigned, before the House rose in the fall, in December, you had the Conservatives, the Bloc, and the NDP all say they were going to vote non-confidence in the government when given the opportunity, regardless of whether the Prime Minister stayed or not. So there's really no opportunity for this government to pass any legislation. They need the support of one of those opposition parties to pass bills. So there's no confidence for this government to really limp on. And both, the Bloc, the Conservatives, and the NDP all said, it doesn't matter who the leader is, we're going to vote non-confidence. So there's really no mandate. Trudeau is, kind of delaying the inevitable election a bit by pushing it, proroguing Parliament until late March. So I think exactly what Jim said is going to take place. The Liberals are going to put in place a new leader. They might delay. They might try to push back exactly when the Parliament resumes and they have to face that confidence test, or they might just say, hey, I'm the new leader, let's call an election immediately. But it's going to happen, and they're not really going to have much runway or bandwidth to do anything. So we will get that election likely in the early spring.
Yeah, so the proroguing of Parliament, what other effects might that have?
Yeah, so when you prorogue Parliament, just for those unfamiliar, you're essentially restarting the session. So it has to resume whenever it does with a throne speech, which is when the government lays out its priorities for the next session of Parliament. This is always a confidence matter. So we have the throne speech delivered, of course, by the Governor General, but written by the government. And then there's a vote on whether or not the House of Commons agrees with the general direction. From what Jagmeet Singh has said today, from what Pierre Poilievre has said consistently, and what from Francois Blanchet of the Bloc Québécois have said, they're going to vote against it. So if that happens, if we get to that point where Parliament resumes, they try to go ahead with a throne speech, it'll be almost instantly defeated unless there's some, people's minds are changed. So that means that we're going to instantly go into an election. The new leader, whoever it is, will have to go to the Governor General and request a dissolution and call an election. So prorogation resets things, but it's not something that can, be used to permanently prevent an election from happening. Right. It just means that when we come back, we got to restart this whole thing again, and that means an immediate confidence vote.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot to talk about. We'd like you to join the conversation as well. What do you think about about Justin Trudeau's announcement today? Give us a call, 204-780-0893. So I want to ask you a bit more about the timing of this. You were saying, they've been limping along and it's gone on and on. So why did it take so long? Can you get inside Justin Trudeau's head, and did he just see things a different way? What was going on with that?
I was talking during the break with some Liberal MPs who wanted the Prime Minister to go. And I kept asking the same question, what is taking so long? It seems like, the opposition is really building. And some of the messaging I got was that PMO was pushing back against some of these calls from caucus. You can only delay the inevitable so long. But the feeling that, or what I heard was, people just didn't understand what the delay was. I understand that, maybe you didn't want to, resign during the holiday break and wanted to wait till January. But the signals, that were coming from PMO were very, very, kind of mixed, or at the very least, not very determinative. Did he actually believe he had an opportunity to, hold on to power? I think some of those people really close to him, I don't think they were willing to give up as quickly as perhaps we saw it. That being said, this delaying of this process, the break between when Freeland resigned and now isn't that significant. But if you remember back in October, 25 MPs called for him to resign. Maybe if he had done it then, there would have been an opportunity a bit more, for bandwidth for a new leader to really kind of maybe work with a Parliament. Right now, it just seems like the Prime Minister held out as long as he could before he finally saw that he had no opportunity forward, and then just said, okay, well, I guess I have no path forward. I guess I have to quit. And the timing isn't really ideal for anyone at this stage, because there's no opportunities for a new leader to put legislation forward, to accomplish anything in this Parliament. We're just at this state where we're basically going to go into an election whenever a new leader is chosen.
Yeah, so many things to be taken into account. And please join us in this conversation, 204-780-0893, and tell us what you think of what's gone on and what's going to happen. And let's go back to the phone lines. We have Stuart on the line. Hi, Stuart.
Yes.
So what do you think?
Basically, Trudeau should have resigned several years ago and allowed a change in government, given the fact that he had accumulated, as any leader does, a baggage of unpopularity.
All right. Well, thank you very much for that comment. And we'll ask Marco to comment as well. Do you think that too?
I think it's interesting because you look at the polling, and I know polling's not an exact science, but you look at, where the Liberal Party was in terms of popularity. It was very competitive up until, I want to say, the spring of 2023 or the summer of 2023. And it just seemed to hit this absolute, nosedive at that point. And if you remember, it's oddly coincided with a really big cabinet shuffle that the Prime Minister oversaw. And I don't know if it was just, Pierre Poilievre's message gaining traction, people getting frustrated with this government, maybe a sense that this government wasn't really kind of as responsive as they like to their concerns around housing and affordability, or maybe just, the sense that this inflationary, surge that we saw wasn't going to be, wasn't going to dissipate immediately. I'm not quite sure what happened, but they seemed to hit this roadblock in the summer of 2023. And since then, there's been really no path forward. And some pollsters will, point to different kind of metrics to gauge, the popularity of the leader. But one thing I heard that I thought was really compelling was when you ask voters, who's the most responsive or who listens to your concerns, that can be really, indicative of where if voters think that people, leaders are actually willing to change or willing to hear them out. Mm-hmm. Once you lose that, once people think you're not listening to me, it doesn't matter what they think of you personally or your party, it's really tough to recover. And I think voters just kind of hit that block where they just said, this guy's been in power too long. I don't think he's listening to us. And maybe he should have resigned a year ago, maybe a couple months ago. But once voters made that decision up in a big mass of them, it really was tough to see how the Liberals would recover.
Yeah. I want to sort of get a sense from you of the state of the Liberal Party right now. I mean, we know Trudeau has stepped aside, but he cited internal battles as a reason for him to resign. So what do you make of that comment? Is the entire place in total disarray and at each other's throats, or what do you think?
It's interesting because, internal battles is an interesting way to say, people want me gone. That a lot of the decision in the ranks is not because people, are frustrated with each other or they're, going after, a particular, minister or some other figure. It's because they're divided over the direction of the party, whether or not he's the best person to lead them into the next election. Going into, even December, it seemed like most Liberal MPs were willing to give the Prime Minister the benefit of the doubt. And then, of course, Freeland's resignation sparked this latest call. And I don't necessarily think it's because Chrystia Freeland was this great unifying figure in the Liberal caucus. I think it's just kind of indicative of some judgment lapses that the Prime Minister has made that I think really kind of brought that home. And it's like if you lose your most loyal, minister, it's kind of a bad omen for your future. So I think the internal battles he's talking about, we'll see some fighting as we get into a leadership race, as people try to jockey for their best candidate. But I don't think there's a huge rift in the Liberal Party. I think people just were coming to grips with a public that wanted the Prime Minister gone. Yeah. And, he was resisting it, and that created this internal tension.
Well, you mentioned Freeland, and Trudeau calls Freeland an incredible political partner. So what do you think will be her next steps?
Ooh, that's curious. She definitely would be an interesting candidate. She has, I think it's fair to say, one of the most broad public profiles of anyone who is a credible candidate here. I think a recent poll said, I think it's between her and Mark Carney in terms of top choices. And early on in a race, that's more so, a familiarity contest. Like, have you heard of this person again? So I don't necessarily know if that will, allow her to win or will prove to be super advantageous. That being said, she'll carry a lot of the baggage of this government. And the people I talk to in Liberal caucus will say things like very accomplished, very intelligent person, very successful, but some of the same criticisms you can make of the Prime Minister, you could also make to her. She's made a few kind of communication gaffes. Her ability to connect with voters, I don't know if it's I don't know if people are totally sold on that. So she definitely will be a strong and interesting candidate if she decides to take that leap, but she'll definitely inherit a lot of the baggage of the Trudeau government, even as her and the Prime Minister had that late rift.
Let us know what you think. Give us a call, 204-780-0893. Now that Prime Minister Trudeau has announced that he is stepping down as leader of the Liberal Party. So, Marco, this is all happening as Trump's inauguration is set to take place in the coming weeks. How will this news impact relations with the U.S.?
It's really interesting. The Prime Minister faced that question, and his reaction was basically, "Hey, this government's going to continue to focus on this. This is our top priority, even as we go through this leadership process." But it is kind of interesting that he's stepping down weeks before, I think 2 weeks before Donald Trump gets inaugurated. I think his election victory is going to be certified by Congress today. And when it comes to having a strategy, or when it comes to responding to this tariff threat, you would think that there was a desire for some, kind of more stable leadership, someone with a clearer mandate to deal with Trump. That being said, I guess you could also argue how, maybe there's some differences in terms of the approach you take with Donald Trump, but I don't think there's any kind of disagreement that this is our most important trading partner, and we have to do everything we can to avoid these kind of crippling tariffs. So, they've rolled out a $1.3 billion border enforcement strategy just before the Christmas break. Is that something a conservative government would undo? I don't think so. I don't think there's any kind of decision in terms of how these different parties will approach a Trump administration. Will deal with it on the policy level. It might be different in terms of how they approach, how they talk to the new administration in the White House. But in terms of those policy differences, I just don't see those materializing. That being said, I get the point that whoever is taking on Trump probably wants a strong mandate, or at least the ability to pass legislation in the House to respond to a tariff threat.
Well, that's from the U.S. perspective, but how does this make Canada look on the world stage, or is the world paying much attention?
I don't know. The Prime Minister is such an interesting figure in that he, I think, unusually for a Canadian Prime Minister, has a lot of global profile.
Yeah.
When he makes announcements, the world listens. He's probably one of the most prominent progressive leaders in the world, whether you like the guy or not. So I think the world is definitely paying attention. Some people, especially in conservative circles outside of Canada, took some glee in seeing the Prime Minister lose some of that luster, lose some of that popularity. He was definitely, very vocal in the importance of fighting against climate change, touting the benefits of a carbon tax. So I think on a global perspective, maybe this, is a bit of a ding to some of those progressive values he championed, and kind of saying, oh, he's losing his luster. But I think generally speaking, yeah, he was kind of had this big public profile, and seeing him, kind of walk away from the global stage will definitely get attention.
Yeah.
Will it, reflect on Canada? I don't necessarily know. I think it's just more kind of the Trudeau celebrity that is in focus right now.
Well, and though, how do you expect the NDP and Conservatives to make use of him stepping down?
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like the Conservatives have the most to lose from this, and that so much of their messaging has been tied to the anti-Trudeau message. T.R. Poilievre seemingly starts every press conference, with, after 9 years of Justin Trudeau, he'll have to change that messaging a bit to accommodate with whoever takes over the helm. And you're seeing that right now, saying, hey, all the Liberals are accountable for what's going on with the Trudeau government. So they'll have to position themselves in a different way. They've taken some shots at Mark Carney, a possible contender, but, if he doesn't win the leadership, will they have to change course? For the NDP, they're in an interesting position. They've already said they're walking away from this Liberal government, regardless of who the new leader is. But, for the NDP, is this also going to give them, some pause? Like, how do they grapple with a new leader who potentially could, take some progressive votes from them? I think right now everyone's kind of at a standing pattern. Trudeau has been the lightning rod of so much criticism that it kind of made their jobs as opposition leaders a bit easier. So when you have a new leader in, total gamble, it's not quite clear how things will shape up.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because so much of the criticism has been directed at Justin Trudeau himself. And so whether that'll make them have to think up something else to talk about as things are in disarray. But so caucus is expected to meet this Wednesday. What are you going to be keeping an eye out for?
I think for me, the most important things that I will kind of keep an eye on is there someone who caucus unifies around, or if there are a few people who caucus unifies around. Chrystia Freeland is obviously that big name that jumps out. Are you going to see some people kind of rally to her, or some people maybe walk away or try to take her down? Conversely, Dominic LeBlanc is kind of seen as the prime minister's preferred choice. Are people going to rally around him? And then conversely, what about an outsider like Mark Carney? I'm really kind of curious to see where the caucus stands, who's supporting who's trying to undercut other people, who's trying to take people out of the game, and where they put their kind of organizational abilities. Who are caucus going to rally around to in terms of organizational support? It's one thing to endorse someone. It's another thing to work with them, provide staff members to help pursue their leadership bid. So I really hope that maybe it's too early to see some key contenders emerge, but very curious to see who caucus kind of supports, or who some of the big names that come out of that caucus meeting are.
Lots to watch for, and thank you so much for being with us and giving us some perspective and insights on all this. Thank you very much, Marco.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye. That's Marco Vellotti. He is editor-in-chief of iPolitics.
Taken by the lightning, one in a million, one in a million. She found a higher calling, one in a million. She had a pipe dream, living in a song till it hit mainstream. FM radio and a cover of a magazine.
That's Toronto string quartet The Fretless, who asked local folk artist Madeline Roger to perform the vocals on a few songs, including that one. That was Pipe Dream. And Chloe Friesen is here singing along, I might say. One of your faves?
Definitely one of my faves. One of my faves of 2024. Such a good album. I've loved The Fretless for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
And then Madeline Roger appears on the scene and joins forces. It's
beautiful.
Magic. It's magic.
Magic. However, that's not who's going to be on your show today. I bet that's not what you're talking about on the show today.
No,
Tell me
you can
what.
probably bet what we're going to talk about on the show today. Lori,
can.
Again, Prime Minister Trudeau says he's resigning as leader of his party once his successor is picked. We are going to walk you through all the latest developments of today's news on Up to Speed. It's the news of the day. Lots of updates to come.
It is. We just heard some great insights from Marco Vellotti from iPolitics.
Okay.
Just so interesting and so much to talk about.
So much to talk about.
Yeah.
So stay tuned for Up to Speed.
Thank you. That's Chloe Friesen, guest host on Up to Speed between 3 and 6 this afternoon. And thanks to everybody, those who called in, and also to our technical director, Marshall Hodgins, director Sierra Sanders. Our producer is Wendy Parker, and YouTube live stream person, Kevin Nipatebo. I'm Lori Hoogstraten. I'll see you again tomorrow. What a day it's been in politics. A day I think that most of us were expecting would come along pretty soon, and we've had some interesting discussions around it, and I'm sure we will have more as well. Riley tells us that it's staying cold, but just for a while, and then it's going to get nicer later in the week. Might get a little bit of snow. Today is sunny and crispy, and you can get out there and get some rosy cheeks and wear your mittens and all those things. Thanks again for joining us on Radio Noon, and I'll talk to you again tomorrow. Goodbye.